Hello guys, this is John from Bethel, Minnesota. This is my 1983 Ford F-150 and I'm here for Dude, I Love My Truck Home Edition. This truck has been in my family since new. My uncle Gordy Hendren bought this brand new on July 7th, 1983. Sadly, he passed away in 2012 and this was his baby as long as I can remember. This thing was at every family event, as a child, at our family lake lot. It was a big part of my childhood, this truck. It's actually a really neat truck. It's the 80s time capsule because he bought it, customized it in the 80s, and pretty much kept it that way. There's a few things like the Weston running boards that don't quite go with the 80s motif, but, for the most part, everything's was done back in 1983 and he just kept updating it. Truck's been repainted several times, but it always kind of came back to this same look. The stats on the truck, it's a 1983 with a 300 inline six. That's a 125 horsepower engine. Also, my uncle was a huge fan of penguins, so he had the windows acid etched as long ago as I can remember. And that's a penguin, no matter what anybody says. His name was Gordy, so of course he's got his name on the door, and on the passenger door it says guest for whoever is riding with him. A lot of stuff has been replaced because he had the Ford Super Seal warranty, which was a rust warranty. He was religious about it. It came with a little book that you brought to your dealership, and every year you had to go in and they did a coating, and he brought it in every year. I still have the book to this day where he signs it and the service writer signs it. And in 1995, they wrote him a letter, Ford did. That was kind of a funny letter to me, but it basically says, we get it, you're not getting rid of this truck. Here's a big check for the cash value of the truck in today's market. Go away. And that was the last time he redid it, was probably with that check. And from then on, it never, as far as I know, it never saw winter duty again. So it is one of the cleanest F-150s that you'll see in Minnesota. So inside, it came standard with a vinyl bench seat. Knitted bench seat is what they called it. This seat was replaced probably in the late 80s. I do not have a receipt for this seat, so I'm not 100% sure. It's a flex steel style seat. It's very comfortable, even though the foam's kind of, past it. I think it would be I think the goal in the future sometime would be to have the foam redone and maybe them recovered but keep the red velour. And it's got 178,000 original miles. That's verified through receipts. When I got the truck in 2015, it had 158,000. So it put about 20,000 miles on in 5 years. But before that, it probably hadn't seen 5,000 miles since about in the previous 10 years. Other than that, we got a vinyl bench seat in the back. I have some things that have come with the truck, like an original hat from the dealership, which is no longer in business. It has been changed into a Invergirl Ford dealership now. I also have my uncle's jacket that he had made for this truck. My uncle was a lot like, I always tell people he reminded me of Burt Reynolds and Kenny Rogers. That's who he looked like, sounded like, acted like, from the 70s, back when they were cool. And he loved leather jackets, so this leather jacket matches the truck, which is a cool thing, and I'm glad that I have it, and I take it out at car shows. Let's pop the hood. 300 inline six with a 1-barrel Carter carburetor. It has 125 horsepower. I did put this on the dyno once. Some friends egged me into it, and we got 92 rear wheel horsepower, which is probably about right if you subtract the driveline loss on a C6. It runs great. People always ask me what it's like to drive a truck with 92 rear wheel horsepower. I tell people it drives like a normal truck. And especially since the front end's been rebuilt, it drives like a brand new truck. Where it does lack is if you want to pass someone on the interstate. you put your foot to the floor and it doesn't as much accelerate as it advances. So that's it. That's my uncle's truck. I've had it for 5 years. His son had it for a while and then was trying to figure out what to do with it. And we made a deal. Neither of us wanted to leave the family, so here it is. And I treasure it always. And I miss my uncle, and I sure hope he appreciates what I do to keep this truck going. My goals are to do very little to it, to keep it exactly the way he left it as long as possible. The only thing I want to do to it is he never did anything with the engine. It's a bone stock engine. I'd like to do some period correct upgrades. I love the 300 inline six, something like a Clifford intake with a 4-barrel carb and some split headers. Just something to make it a little bit more performance and look cool when you at a car show and you can pop the hood. So obviously clean up all that wiring that's under there from years of J.C. Whitney accessories. The other thing is it doesn't have insulation because it is a base model, so it is very loud when you lots of highway noise. The engine's quiet. It's got single exhaust, all stock exhaust, and pretty new. But I would like to pull up the vinyl flooring, put Dynamat down, and put a carpet in it. That is probably the only thing I want to do to the inside. And I think that's it. Other than that, it's just keeping it going for as long as possible and hoping there's another generation in our family that will appreciate this truck someday down the road. Well, thank you, and I hope you all have a good weekend.